Hello everybody and welcome to this week's episode of Sniper Sundays. I hope you're all well and had a great weekend. So today I'm going to review some of last week's price action and run over what we discussed on the last Sniper Sundays episode, and then look through, as I said, what's happened last week on the charts, and then look ahead of next week. So where should I start? So this week I think I'll start off with, as always, with the news, the fundamentals coming out next week, because we always need to be fully prepared of what's coming up. So one of the first things on your checklist when doing your analysis on a Sunday, or whenever you do it for the week ahead, is to look for the fundamentals for the week ahead. So next week, Monday, we've got sort of the major news really happening is at 11:45 UK time, which is the New Zealand dollar employment change and unemployment rate. Tuesday, we have got Aussie dollar news, cash rate, the Bank of Australia rate statement. That's quite big news. That's at 5:30 in the morning. We then have more New Zealand news on Wednesday, and then let's see, Thursday, quiet day Thursday, and then Friday, Australian news, and then some pound news. So you can see here, and Canadian news on Friday. So we can see here the biggest news this week, the biggest fundamentals is the Aussie dollar and the New Zealand dollar. So quite interesting given the fact of where Aussie dollar and New Zealand dollar are in the charts at the moment. Obviously we were looking at this at the end of last week. So the news coming out this week is very interesting and very important for these pairs. So let's begin with, let's scan through our pairs and let's look at what happened last week. And I said, let's look at what we think is going to happen for the week ahead. So Euro USD, very interesting last week. So if we look back at last week's Sniper Sundays, I highly recommend you reviewing each Sniper Sundays the week even when the week's finished. Go back and look and see how it played out, and also a lot of the time on the evening and morning calls, also looking back once the day's played out, looking back and seeing, because often things play out just as expected, and we can learn a lot from it. So on Sniper Sundays last week, Euro USD, obviously I highlighted this key level on the weekly chart here, which was 1.1110. Now, we had, on the weekly chart, we had one touch, two touch, and we were just resting on this for the third time at the end of last week. As explained, we were expecting a push through at some point because there was so much fundamentals. Said whether we pushed down to meet 1.1000 was debatable, but we were definitely going to break through this and then pull back up. So basically everything that was said in Sniper Sundays on Euro USD has actually followed through. We dropped down to the daily. We were all fully aware from following this last week that we had that push through, had that spike down, and then we reversed back up. Now, this is very interesting coming into next week because, as expected, we had this reversal. So we broke through on the FOMC meeting, and this is what we see a lot of the time with the manipulation in the market. And here we can see, we can sort of understand the manipulation. Here we have this support level. The fundamentals, we've broken through. Here. So any long trades that were taken before, many people would be taking a long trade when they saw this rejection, saw this double bottom. But we stayed away because we knew that the manipulation would have that third drive, or that drive down into the bottom before making a reversal, if any. So you can see here we've got support, 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 and it was just obvious that price was going to come down and spike through. That's why we waited to take any trades. Now, when we did spike through, we took a long, but then price continued to fall down. And this is where we can see the manipulation. So we had a bullish day. Now everybody thinks that we're going to take, that the Euro USD is going to go short. So then they jump in short trades. Price pushes down. Everyone's in profit for a little bit, but then all of a sudden we reverse and then we come back up. Also, anybody that's in long trades, when it's pushed down, that's holding on to long trades, then they might hold on to these, but then as price pushes down a little bit further, then they get out of the long trades, take a loss, then all of a sudden we reverse back up to the upside. So the market knows how to play and trick people. Now, we've got this daily morning star formation, not the strongest morning star. We kind of predicted this a few days beforehand, but we had this push down. We had this doji candle. Explained on Thursday evening that we were to get a nice bullish candle here. This would finish as a nice morning star formation on the daily, but we didn't have the strongest. We did only just come back up and retest resistance. You can see we didn't break above this resistance level. We more or less came back and retested. So on a weekly chart, we can see here you've got a weekly doji candle, which is showing the price slowing down and sort of a bit of indecision in the market. Now, it's hard to really tell exactly where this is going to go next. I do like the reversal to the upside and the US dollar to get weaker and this to push up higher. But you can see here we had this really weak daily, morning star formation. So what we're watching now coming into next week is this level. Can we break higher? We just put on some trend lines across this to get the direction. So we go back out to the weekly, get the overall bias, the overall sort of direction of the market. And here we can see that the market has been overall in a downtrend here for quite some time. We have sort of broken one thing which is quite key to look at is we sort of broke this resistance here, came back, and we're now retesting this resistance line as support. So this could be a factor to look ahead for next week, that we might bounce off this and push higher. So I'm keeping that in mind. But we have got the new trend here that is now this line here. We just go right out onto the weekly chart. Let's see how we're acting. So you can see here we have actually broke the weekly trend, this trend line. So we are looking quite weak at the moment on Euro USD. But could this just be a fake out here? So we see we've got this weekly trend. We bounced off that, come down, broken through, and we're having a sort of fake out here. So we are sort of in middle ground at the moment with Euro USD. Just 1 second. You can just see here that we're just kind of floating around, and we need to see some price action next week to really kind of give us a direction. So we can see we've sort of had that fake out. We've had this doji on a weekly indecision. It's hard to really, from at the moment, really give a certain direction. Now, on a daily chart, we can see we've sort of come along, have this, on the weekly chart, have this falling wedge. You've got a support here, support, which you've also found. So we are starting to find levels of support. Now, if we drop down to the daily chart, and so what I'm going to be looking out for next week is, we just put another trend on here. You can see there's a trend line coming across there. So we've got the long-term trend line, which is here. We've got the outer trend line, which is here. And we've got the inner trend line, which is here. So everything is pointing down at the moment. So we are still bearish on Euro USD, even though we managed to get that long trade. We're now coming to that point, which is very, very important, which is at this level. So what we're going to need to be looking out for next week, which is going to be very, very important, is this level here. Once we come up here, it's going to be very important to whether we can break above this. We can break up here, come back, retest the support, and then push higher, or whether we're actually going to reject this level, the bears come back into the market and see this push back down. So on all trades taken from the bottom here last week, stop loss at break even, take 50% profit, and we're going to see whether we can actually push up higher. So what we're going to see is we can push up higher, we may come up and retest this sort of resistance level, the last lower high, which is here. We may come up to here. If we are going to keep pushing up higher, we may come down, retest the support, and then what we're going to do is go out and test that outer trend line here. So remember, once you break the inner trend line, we make our way out to the outer trend line. So that is one possibility. Second possibility is we could also just break out of this trend line, come up to this lower high here, and then push down. So we need to remember we are still bearish overall. You can see here by the long term, the outer and the inner trend line on Euro USD, that you can see we are still overall bearish. This is the last lower high. We made a new lower low. Now we need to see how we act around these areas. Are we going to reject this resistance and push lower, or are we going to manage to push up higher? So coming into next week, there isn't a lot of euro news, not an awful lot of US dollar news. So it's going to be interesting to see how price is going to act around these levels. I do like the US dollar to actually weaken and for this to push up higher. So we're in new territory for Euro USD. We haven't been this low for a long time. I'll just flip out to a weekly chart again. Mentioned this last week. The last time we were this low was back here in May 2017. So I think we need a bit more news to push us even lower. So I'm looking for this pair to actually extend this push up higher and come up. So if not in this trade yet, what I'll be looking on Monday is to see how we act around this resistance level. If we can break up and push up higher, then I'll be looking for a pullback into this sort of support level, creating an inverse head and shoulders, and then looking at long trades to come up higher. But it is very, very crucial to see how we act around this resistance. You can just see here on the 4-hour chart, we're coming up for that third test of the trend line, point 1, point 2, and point 3, which is going to be vital coming into early next week. So that's what we're watching out for. We'll have to see how this plays out to basically get a better understanding of where this can go next week. So Euro GBP, next pair. I just highlighted this again last week because I just want to explain to people. So and so that you can learn. When we have a trend line like this, so basically I highlighted this as I've shown you the breakout sort of strategy on the 4-hour. When we get a breakout candle on the 4-hour candlestick, we highlight that area, and then we wait to see whether we can break out of that to see whether the trend is going to continue. Now, often what we've seen quite a few times is us reject the top of that trend, sort of consolidate within this little range, and then we can look for a short trade. Or if we break out, then we can look to go up higher. Now, what we can see here, and why I've highlighted this as an example, is you can see here we've highlighted this 4-hour breakout candle, here. Drop down to the 1-hour. You can see we've then broken out on the 1-hour and the 4-hour, broken out, no sign of pulling back, and you can see the bulls are taking control. So we just pushed up higher, higher, and higher, and then we come up to the last lower high here and just smash through it, smash through weekly resistance, smash through this previous resistance here. So all of this sort of trend or this pullback that we had here was outdone. As you can see here, pulled back and that big push up higher, and then we came all the way up to 9150 or 90 0.9200 nearly. So at the moment we're in this trade. If we didn't manage to get into it last week, then I imagine that we are going to have more opportunities. But I broke this down on Friday. If you look back through the charts from the weekly, quite a nice little spike to the upside there. I dropped down to the daily. On the daily now, we also have this really nice shooting star, which looks very, very bearish. It looks like we're going to see a push down next week and to the 4-hour. So I broke down in the chart and sent them through to the group on Friday, and even posted a setup with a stop loss and a take profit levels on this. So we had a nice push down, came back up, might have hit some stop losses at break even, but as always, unless I state to look for unless I state that the short or the trade is no longer valid, we can still keep looking for short trades. Now, on this, we had this nice 4-hour bearish shooting star, and before that, let me just drop down to the 1-hour, because it was all about what I was teaching on Friday was flicking in between different time frames and getting the confidences to add up, getting more and more confidence onto your side so that we can add them up. Sorry, 1 second, guys. So what we were looking at was getting as many confidences to build up as possible, so then it can help you, gives you more confidence for a trade. Now, what we were looking at here was we had this push up to the upside originally up here, push down, found support, push back up, and from here we were looking to see whether price was going to make a double top or is going to keep pushing up higher. But we were watching to see for any weakness on this pair. Now, monitoring this for weakness, we had this Fibonacci retracement tool, and from here, as we started to come up to the 61.8%, we started to show some weakness. We had a shooting star, push down, but then we kept pushing up higher. And then it was this area then that came very, very interesting. So obviously hitting a 78% retracement level. If we're looking at taking a short trade, as I said before, If you're taking it from the 78% level, your stop loss is a lot shorter, and your profit is a lot more. If you need to take a trade from, let's say, the 38% level, see this level here, then your stop loss has to be a lot bigger. So if we can wait for price to come all the way up to the 68 or the 78% level, then our trade and our risk is a lot less. So we came up to the 78% level here, started showing rejection, see a spike to the upside, and so on here. If I just remove this Fibonacci, then along with this third touch, 0.1, 0.2, and 0.3 on the trend line, if I just adjust this, we drop down to the lower time frames. What we could see, which was basically a replication of what I had shown on some trades earlier in the week from the bottom of the trend, is that we were watching this on the 30-minute and the 15-minute. Let's just go down to the 15-minute actually. You can see here, so we had this high, price was fluctuated, pushed back up, had this evening star formation, 1, 2, 3, 3 candlestick, bearish engulfing, push down. That was our first sign to take a short trade. So highlighted this to the group, looked at taking shorts, and bang down we went, down for 30 pips. Then we came back up, price came back up towards this level, and then we can see again on the 15-minute, we've had this a push up, a hanging man, 15-minute bearish engulfing, another bearish engulfing, and then we push down. But how we look at building confidences is this area here, the morning star formation, and this area. Let's flick out to the 30-minute. You can see once we went to the 30-minute, that morning star formation here was actually a big bearish engulfing. And then we look from when we came back up and hit resistance here, we had this real nice hanging man, shooting star formation, and then a 30-minute bearish engulfing. So even if we hadn't ended on a 15-minute chart, there was a nice opportunity here after this bearish engulfing on the 30-minute chart to push down once again for about another 20 pips. So we'll see how this goes early next week. At the moment, I'm looking for this to come back down and come back down towards the 0.9100. We have to see how the pound acts next week. Obviously, very, very volatile at the moment. We may form this sort of triangle formation, which is here. So we've got this triangle formation here. If I just extend this back out now, that we've made a new high. So I'll be watching price as we get down to this sort of counter trend line here to see how we react. If we can break below this, then there is a lot of room for this to drop down to the downside after that big push up last week. But the pound is very, very temperamental. We'll have to see how it reacts. At the moment, I do like the short trades on this. And we can see here we ended the week on a nice 4-hour bearish engulfing and a daily as a shooting star. So quite good signs for our short trade on that. Euro AED, just zoom out on this quickly. Last week, it shows you the power of the third touch of the trend line, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. Since we rejected that trend line, we had the morning star formations on the lower time frame and the reversal signs, which I keep showing you. We've had this weekly bullish engulfing last week, and we've had another big push up to the upside. We haven't looked back once, really. We haven't really shown much slowdown, apart from at 1.62500, which I highlighted here, this inverse head and shoulders. We had that 100 pip pullback, and then we just continued to extend higher, and we do look like we're going to come and create a new high above the previous high. Now, one thing that I want to highlight, if I just get rid of this, so you can see here, if I just drop down to the 4-hour quickly, you can see here how we broke through that resistance, came back, retested here, and then we had the next push higher. So what I want to do is just get rid of this for the moment to clear up our charts. And remember, always start on weekly and do your top-down analysis. We'll start on the monthly, weekly, daily. So let's have a good look and just see what the situation is with this at the moment. And we can see now, we'll go back out to the monthly. We do have this trend line on here coming all the way down. So we are coming into a pinnacle place here. I'll drop down to the weekly here now. You see that we do have this this trend line coming across the top, which is very, very important. So sort of coming into this long-term sort of triangle formation here, and we need to see how price is going to react. Even if we take that one away and just put this line in here, take that one away for the moment, you can see we're coming into this sort of triangle formation. Price is going to either reject this level here and push all the way back down, or if we break above, then we could really see some new highs on this pair and break out way above the high made back in December 2018. So really interesting level coming up next week for Euro AUD. Obviously, we've got the news coming out for the Australian dollar, which is also very, very important. So is the Australian dollar going to gain some strength back and be able to push this down? Or is the Australian dollar going to get even weaker? Now, I'll just go over to the Australian dollar while we're talking about it. And we can just see what we have to take into consideration with the Australian dollar is how weak it actually is. We're all the way down at lows that we haven't seen back since 2009. Remember financial crisis 2008, 2009, back at these times. So yeah, the Australian dollar is very, very bad. Are we going to keep continuing lower, or are we going to see a little push up higher? Will the news and the fundamentals next week give it a push back up? I think we might see a push back up higher and get supported from around this area. If so, then it looks like if we drop down to this on the daily, that we may find some resistance on Euro AUD from around these levels. Now remember, we had that original short from the top up here, about 500 pips. Many of you took a long from down here last couple of weeks ago and up 400, 450 pips. Now we're coming up to this very, very important level. So this is an area to look out for next week. I'll be watching to see how we act around there. And yeah, on the lower time frames, you can see already we're starting to show some signs of slowing down. We have got a 4-hour shooting star, dojis, and yeah, bearish candles. So I'm not going to jump into this too soon, but I do think coming up to these sort of levels here next week, we do need to keep it on our radar that we may see a reversal from this level. If not, then this could go a lot higher. So keeping this on our watch list to look at next week, as well as Euro NZD, because we also have New Zealand dollar news coming out on Monday. So is it time for the New Zealand dollar to gain some strength after this big drop we've seen? So again, if I just go out to the weekly, we can see here the power of the trend lines, the third touches of the trend line. Look how simple this chart is, guys. No indicators, no support, resistance, just straight up looking at price action, trend line showing us the direction and what's happening in the chart. Point 1, point 2, point 3. Point 3, we had that third touch and we've had a bullish run since. Now, if I drop down to the daily chart, we can see here, this is where we're looking in, taking that low. We're now coming up to the last lower high in this downtrend, this recent downtrend that we've had. Since we've pushed it down here, lower high, lower low, we're coming up to that lower high area, which is quite important. Are we going to be able to break through that and then actually push up higher? If we break above this level, it means that this downtrend that we've seen here is invalid, even though we've broken through the trend already. As you can see here, we've broken through this trend line and been pushing up, pushing up, pushing up. Unless we break above this high, this trend is still valid. So if we break above this, then we could be looking at this coming up even higher and continuing this uptrend and pushing up higher and making new highs above here. So very interesting level next week. I'm going to be watching this early next week on Monday, as we have this level, which is very interesting to see whether we can break. It's going to be very important. If we can't break, we fell. We have a sort of a run up to here next week, and fail to break above here, then we can look for short trades on this pair once again, and we may look at coming down. And we can get short trades on here, then that means that this trend is still valid, this lower high, lower low, lower high, and it means we could go all the way down and make a new lower low below this low. So very interesting with this next week, but at the moment we're coming into a very important area, so which is this area here at 1.700, 50 or 55. So keep an eye out for this next week. Keep this mapped out and this resistance on your chart coming into next week, and we'll have a look at that. Now GBP JPY, let's drew this back on. If you look back to last week's Sniper Sundays, we're just talking about the lower highs, the lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, and explained, I drew this counter trend line on and explained that I was looking for new lower lows on GBP JPY. Now we broke through that counter trend line. Once we broke through that counter trend line, we can look for short trades. Short trades are valid all the way down, but I didn't expect such such a drop on GBP JPY. We did have this sort of trend line drawn on here that we thought we might come down to, but price has absolutely tanked and come down all the way to this sort of long-term trend line on the weekly chart. Now we have touched that last Friday, showing some sort of support. I'll just zoom out so you can see here, C point 1, point 2, point 3, and this is going to be a pinnacle time for this pair also. So watch out for some manipulation around this area. We're very, very weak on GBP, JPY at the moment, and on GBP pairs in general, but we've had a massive sell-off into this weekly support level, a weekly trend line, long-term trend line, and I'm going to be watching price here. You can see on the 4-hour, spike, doji, doji, just showing some indecision around these levels, and we're sort of just bouncing around. Now I do think that we're going to see some support around these levels, but be careful for any manipulation first. I'm highlighting this area here. So you can see here we sort of had a spike up to the upside, a fake out, a spike to the downside, fake out. We've had a fake out either way. Now it might be time for this to actually gain some momentum and push back up. I will be watching, and we might have a breakout of this level, a pull back into this, and then we can look at taking long trades. But again, we're at very, very crucial levels. As you just see, we're on that weekly trend line. So we need to make sure that that can support, because if we break this support here, there's a huge scope to come down and sort of come down to these levels here, 1.24, which 1.24, 1.25, which is about another 400 pips to the downside. So next week we are going to be zooming in on GBP JPY around this level, highlighting this third touch of the trend line, and are going to be watching this very, very closely for reversal signs and any signs to look at taking long trades. So I will be updating on this next week. So obviously let's add that to your watch list, and we'll keep an eye on that. So GBP USD, we had seen this pair again last week. Sniper Sundays drew on this support level here. Explained that I was definitely expecting some more downside first. Also explained the structure situation: lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high. So it was time to come down and make a new lower low. Especially when we were just sitting on support here, we were just looking to break that and push down. So we broke that, pushed down, but again, we obviously didn't expect such a push down. We broke through all the way down from 1.2400 basically down to 1.21 to 100, so 300 pip move to the downside. Now we are finding some support around these levels. However, you can see here on a daily chart, we've got these tweezer bottoms, sort of a bullish engulfing on the last day. We're looking at long trades on this, which were given out down from around these levels. I do like a reversal from this, but again, we have to keep in mind that we are still in a downtrend here. So I drew on this trend line for us last week. We've broken out of this. It's explaining that once we break out of that trend line, we are in buy territory. You see here on the 1 hour we broke out and we started to push up. But on the 4 hour, as explained, we did have some manipulation last week. You can see here we had a push to the upside, breakout, fake out to the upside like GBP, JPY we just looked at. Then we came down, a fake out to the downside, and now we're back into this sort of range. I'm going to be keeping an eye on this early next week. Don't want to jump into anything too early on Monday. I'm going to be keeping an eye on this. Obviously, we can see we've got this monthly support level 1.200. We're sort of floating in the middle of between monthly support and weekly resistance at the moment. We have come back to retest that as resistance, so we do have scope to keep pushing down lower. Until we break above this, then we are still in short territory and sell territory. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on this and keep our longs at stop loss at break even for those who took the long trades from down here. And we will review this early in the week and keep an eye on this. As I said, everything is sort of in tricky situations at the moment, so we need to see how they play out early in the week and not jump into anything too soon. When I say tricky situations, many of these pairs are in critical levels like on when we see these weeklies on the weekly trend lines, if they're to break, then there's loads and loads of scope to drop, because there's not much support underneath. So we need to see if these weekly trend lines are going to support. GBP CAD, not much to say about this one at the moment. We were reviewing this last week. If I just zoom out on a weekly here, very similar situation, what I'm saying about very, very important levels. I've cleared off a lot on my charts just to give you a clear insight on all of these. Weekly chart, GBP CAD, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. 0.4 could be a fake out on a weekly chart. Drop down to the daily. You can see here, since if we highlight that fake out on a weekly, if I highlight that breakout even on the daily, we can see we then just came into this range. We've just been ranging for the next 4 days. Drop down to the 4 hour, we can see this range. Bouncing off the resistance and not really making any headway. Now, if we break above this level, I do see a big push up higher for GBP CAD, and it's well overdue. If we look on the 4 hour chart, or even if we look on the daily, we can see here we've been non-stop. Look at this trend line. Look how steep this trend line is. So we were looking at this last week when we got a 200 pip long trade on this. We had a long trade from here, as you remember, pushed up, came up, tried to break out of the trend line. And again, guys, look, no fancy indicators, loads and loads of support and resistance on my chart, though I use them, but I like to show this to show how clear price can be and how easy it can be. We just put this trend line on here. So we had a long trade from here with this morning star formation, 1, 2, 3. But then we pushed up, tried to break out, had a nice breakout, 1, 2, 3, evening star formation, the opposite of this. We had it here, and that was the sign that this was going to come down. So we had 1, 2, 3, pushed down and pushed all the way back down, made a new low, and now we're having this sort of consolidation zone here. So we just adjust this trend line. But as what I was saying, you can see how much of a downtrend we've been in. We've just been down, 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 down for so many days. Look how many weeks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 weeks. We've just been pushing down, pushing down, pushing down. We're now at major weekly trend line support. Had a fake out here. So next week I'm looking for longs. I do think that we're going to pull back up, and we're going to see some support, and we're going to see some bulls come back into this pair and start pushing this back up. So actively looking for longs in a consolidation zone at the moment. What I would like to see is a push down to the downside. A fake out to the downside would provide a great opportunity to take a long trade with a shorter stop loss. But what we may see is a push up to the outside. To the upside, sorry, a pull back down, and then we might look for a long trade from there. Again, very good opportunity to take a long trade, so we'll be looking at a setup like this. So again, mark this up, be ready for it next week, and be ready to execute your trades looking off the information I'm giving you. But yes, I do like GBP CAD as a long trade next week. USD JPY, another pair. So if I just pull out here on the daily, or on the weekly, sorry, let's just have a look. Weekly chart, weekly trend line, important level here. You can see price is attempting to break out, big bearish candle. Looks like we're going to set to come lower, but I will be watching next week because we have got these two levels that I've highlighted, which I explained we've been struggling to break out of for the past 2 months, since back in June or back in May. So we've been just sort of consolidating, had a fake up to the upside. Great example of how market will always manipulate you in the wrong way before the bigger move. I talk about this a lot, and I always say how the market will try and manipulate and makes a false move before the major move. That's why often when we're in a trade and we've taken a trade and we see the market move against us, it's nothing to be worried about. It's just the market trying to have that final push before making the bigger move in the opposite direction. Now you can see here we had that break above the resistance, trying to get people to take a long trade, a lot of people take trades on the breakout of a consolidation zone. So anyone taking a long trade here would have then been stopped out as the price came down and pulled all the way down to the bottom. Big bearish weekly candle. Now we're doing the same. We're attempting to break out of the 10700 level, or 10 just underneath here, as you can see highlighted. So next week, what will be interesting to see is how the week opens up and how Monday reacts to this level. We go down to the daily chart. We can see we just ended trying to break through it. So I'll be interested to see whether we can. I do think we're going to come down and test this 10600 support level now, and from there we will see if price can continue to push lower. We've been sort of floating in between the monthly resistance and monthly support. I do think now we're going to come down, we've making a new lower low on this trend. So lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, and now we just made a new lower low. But I do think we're going to extend and come a little bit lower, come down into this 10600 level, and from there I'll be watching next week. But again, we'll have to wait till next week to update on that. And also the reason I'm looking at this is I'm watching to see how the US dollar acts. So if I just quickly flick over to the dollar index, I explained this on Sniper Sundays, I believe, last week as well. Or actually, I think it might have been during the week, about Wednesday. I explained in that on a Wednesday evening call, I think it might have been, that I was expecting a weaker dollar. I was expecting a weaker dollar from these levels and to push back down, and for gold to push up higher. But then what we saw on the Thursday is that manipulation to push price up higher on the US dollar, to get everyone to take long trades, to long the US dollar against other currencies. And then Friday we've seen a pullback down. Now at the moment we've got this really nice even star formation, 1, 2, 3, bearish reversal sign. So it looks like we're set to come down lower. Weekly, we've also had this spike to the upside. Again, what I just explained on the US dollar JPY, a fake out to the upside, a full smooth first before a big move in the opposite direction. Now, if this is in fact happening and we do have that weaker US dollar next week, then I do expect more downside on USD JPY. I expect more downside, and I expect more downside on USD CAD. The USD CAD is an interesting one. So we broke out of that trend line. Remember we had a long trade, a short trade here, but we came out of that as price was looking more bullish. And then I explained last week during the week that we looked like we're going to come up and hit 1.32500. We came just short of that on Thursday, but then Friday we pushed up and hit that daily. Really nice bearish candle. Now we've had a spike, another spike, shooting star formation, and yeah, we look like we're going to push back down next week. We've had this sort of next swing lower high. Let's look at this on the daily chart. Lower low, lower high, lower low, making a lower high, rejecting that weekly level. So this does look good to come down next week. So I will be watching out for taking short trades on this. Let me just get rid of this. So yeah, it looks like we're set to come back down. We've also got a nice sort of Fibonacci on this as well. We haven't quite made the 61.8%, which leads me to believe we may come back up to sort of have another test. You can see here how my extension lines up perfectly with the monthly support level. So we may, if I drop down to the 4-hour chart, we may see another push up with this next week. We do look quite bearish at the moment, ending on Friday with that nice 4-hour bearish engulfing. But I will be looking for a sort of push up into this level next week to tap that 61.8% level. And if we reject that as well, then I think it's all systems go to take a short trade on USD CAD. So that's another one to add to the list and to keep an eye out for. Now, Aussie dollar and USD dollar. Excuse me, guys, just need to drink some water. So, Aussie dollar, USD, New Zealand dollar, pairs that we were watching very, very, very closely last week. Big push down. We're in critical levels. So weak on the Australian dollar at the moment. Just pushed down once again, and we can see a bearish week on a bearish weekly candle. Drop down to the daily. We can see here after this big push down, we had a doji candle on Friday. Now we have that news coming out this week. I do think that it's time for this to gain some bullish momentum. We do have obviously the potential to come down even lower, but I think we've got news coming in next week. We started to see the price action, and what I've said to you before is we often see the move start happening with the currencies before the news comes out, because people are getting in before the retail traders. So let's just have a look. We got Monday's the New Zealand dollar, then Tuesday is the cash rate. So if a move's going to happen, I think that we might see some moves early on Monday and actually start moving on this. Now, we were looking at long trades, but then President Trump was speaking. We were about 20 pips in profit on Friday. Here we can see a really nice pin bar, 4-hour bullish engulfing, 1, 2, 3, morning star formation, reversal sign. I am actively looking for long trades next week on this. Same setup that I was showing, coming down into this sort of level. Any dip lower, any rejection, I am looking to take a long trade. I need to see that support. I need to see another retest here. We may just see another doji candle on Monday, another push to the downside, sort of rejection, and then on Tuesday a push higher. But I will be watching very, very closely Monday. Monday I'll be watching New Zealand dollar and Australian dollar mainly, because we've got the news coming out on the two pairs Monday and Tuesday. They're my top picks early in the week, and obviously we're so oversold on these pairs, and I'm looking at taking long trades. At the end of last week, I'll be looking at jumping into these again next week if the price action shows. So keep an eye on these early next week. You see here we might have this inverse head and shoulders sort of sticking out here. We're finding this support. You can find support here, then it may be time to take a long trade. We might pull back into sort of these regions, test this one more time. You have to remember, don't worry about a little bit of a pullback. We have to remember what things will look like on a 4-hour and a daily candle. But at the moment, really nice reversal sign on the 4-hour chart here, 1, 2, 3. So any more signs, I'll be looking to jumping in. So keep a look out on Aussie dollar and New Zealand dollar early in the week, and I will update on these. But sort of the same setup that I just left on last Friday, and I will be looking at taking long trades on this big push down. Fundamentals may step in and give us that push back up higher that we need. Also with New Zealand dollar, sort of similar situation here. You can see here Friday we ended after this big push down. Go to the weekly chart quickly. Come down to the lows here and spike back up. Daily, we have this daily pin bar, projecting this sort of area of support, as you can see there. And yeah, I'm going to be watching this next week. Also got that 4-hour morning star formation. So I'm going to be watching all around these areas for that setup, similar to what I showed you on Friday. Looking for that setup, looking for something obvious in order to take a long trade from around these areas. So we'll be keeping an eye out on that. Keep an eye on Aussie dollar and New Zealand dollar before everything else next week, because that's where the news is coming from. So that's where the most volatility will be. Now gold. I'll just zoom out on gold on a weekly. You can see here that we are looking quite bullish. High low, equal high here, high low. Just put this on the weekly chart. See here, weekly chart. Long-term trend is up on the long term, on the outer trend, and then the inner trend. We'll just drop down to the daily. See, we're very bullish in gold, and that is why we're looking at long trades on this last week. Let's get rid of this. So you can see here that we came up, we did push back down, but you can see here, but when we had this push back down, the market structure is very, very important. On the daily chart here, it said market up. A very, very useful tool if you're not used to just noticing it on the screen is market up. For instance, lower high, and have these on your chart. Lower low, and then just keep doing that. Lower high, and then for instance, when you see these on the chart, then you can make out the market structure. We also add the support and resistance. I'll drop down to the 4 hour. Sorry, 1 second, guys. Just drop down to the 4 hour here. We just always zoom out on the higher time frames. You can see what the overall trend is. Now we broke out here. Sorry, again, let me just adjust this. We broke out here originally, then tried to push up higher, had this sort of counter trend line here, broke down, but you can see then we had this last lower low, these sort of areas here. We came down, had that round number 1400 and that we came down to, and we had this level that I was trying to get, we were looking at taking long trades to come up and hit on the FOMC meeting. Sorry guys, let me just get rid of this. On the FOMC meeting, I explained to look for the pullback and then to look for the long trade, because I expected price to come up and retest this sort of head and shoulders formation at 1.1439. Now we came up to that, retested it. As I said, we're in an uptrend, so I expect price to come up and test this level. So I'll be watching this next week. I'm actually expecting it to come up and make a new higher high above this. As we are in an uptrend, making higher highs, higher lows. I expect us to come up higher. So I'm watching for the US dollar to get weaker next week, while watching for gold to actually come up and push up a bit higher up here. The weaker the US dollar gets, the stronger gold should get. So I'm watching this to come up a bit higher and break through this barrier and see how high we can go above this. If we break above this, we're in highs that we haven't been in for quite some time. Again, we have to look quite far back, all the way back to 2013. We are showing some signs of slowdown. I will be keeping an eye on gold at the moment, but definitely still got a long bias on this. With this daily bullish engulfing candle, engulfing the previous 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 candles where we were just moving sideways. So it looks like we got some momentum and some direction back into the market. So I'm expecting this to come up higher and make a new higher high. From there, then we'll have to have a look at the trend lines. We might come up and sort of test this sort of rise and wedge formation. There's all sorts of scenarios coming for gold, but I'm expecting this to push up higher first. So keeping an eye on this and expecting this to come up into sort of the 1.460 level. So keeping an eye out for that, and just keep an eye on gold, and we'll update on this next week when I do see trades, or if any trades fit. US oil, let me just get rid of this. So I cleared this chart again just to show you. I just had some trend lines on there, just to show you how easy it can be. But also what we have here is, if we just look on the daily chart, we're coming very close to the daily trend line for the third touch, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. Now I made quite a ballsy call last week on the on Sniper Sundays, and explained that though many people were looking for long trades on oil, I was looking for short trades. I did think that we could come back down to sort of the $50 per barrel once again, and explain that here we had it on the daily chart. We have 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, and we were hugging this trend line here. It looked like we were going to break through it. Then we sort of had this fake push away from it. We've had this push up higher, but on the lower time frames, I pointed this out last week. We had this sort of Fibonacci retracement here, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, retracement 61.8%, daily shooting star, Marubozu candle, no wick at the bottom, looking very bearish. Then the next day, bang, drop down, and we dropped down 400 pips. We're now broken out of that inner trend line that I had on here. I'm just highlighting this trend line here to show you that outer trend line. So I am expecting price to come down lower still on oil. I am expecting it to come down and reach this trend line. But should we break this trend line, then we are looking at price coming down to the last point on this trend line, which is around that $50 to $51 per barrel. Let's say 51 there, nice round figure. Should this break, then I do see oil coming down even more. So interesting week for US oil next week. I drop down to the 4 hour. You can see that we had this flag pattern here, which I was explaining last week to understand, to learn how to trade it. So you can see here we had this push down flag pattern. We draw the trend line on there. We can then clone it, add it there, and then you can see, add this in with confluences like the Fibonacci. So here you can look for here as this pushes up. So we've got 0.1, 0.2. We can clone this and pull it and then use it as a channel. And then we can see here we've had this point and pushed up here, and we can look for short trades from this level. Then along with price action, along with candlesticks. Sorry, let me get rid of this. Along with price action that we see, so looking at things like this, 4-hour bearish engulfing, morning, evening star formations, and so on that I explained to you guys, and then throw in the Fibonacci for the icing on the cake to show that 61.8%. So we've got the 61.8% pullback. We've got the rejection of this channel, which is 2 confluences. Then we had 4-hour bearish engulfing, which was the 3rd confluence, and then other confluences, and then on the lower time frames, along with the fact that we are in a bearish a downtrend since we had this big push down from here. So watching this now coming into next week, we'll be watching how if we can pull up any higher, but I am looking for US oil to come down lower into these sort of regions, but I'll be keeping an eye. Things can change very quickly. News coming out, President Trump tweeting, etc. can change things very, very quickly. That was one of the cause of this big 400 pip drop last week. So I'll be keeping an eye on this coming into next week to see whether we find any support, and we'll update. But in general, it's very, very important to see how we start off the week with this with the US dollar. Are we going to have weakness here of the US dollar and push back down? That's going to affect many of our trades, and that is going to basically decide the week. So given that we have just pulled back in, it's quite similar here with Euro US dollar. We need to make sure that on the dollar index that we are going to continue this bearish pushback down and push back down lower. If we continue this, then that helps us with all of our US dollar crosses like Euro US dollar, and means that Euro US dollar is going to push back up. But we need to see whether the dollar index is just pulling back, having a pullback, as it is bullish at the moment. As you can see on the daily, higher high, higher low, higher high. We may just be having a slight pullback before pushing up higher. So I'm going to be sitting on my hands early next week. The main things I'll be looking for is New Zealand dollar and Australian dollar early in the week, as the fundamentals are out for that. But apart from that, I'm going to be watching at how the US dollar acts early in the week, and that will help us on many of our trades. So we'll be looking out for that. We'll update early in the week, and once things start changing and things start moving as to what our direction and what our bias is on various pairs. But that's the overall setup of what we can see at the market at the moment. So label up your charts, add on what I've said about the trades that I like, to the top of my head, like GB CAD, and all the different scenarios of what I said that could play out. Add them all onto your charts, and then let's be ready for next week, and let's kill the market and make some pips. I hope you enjoyed the video. I will catch up to you when the market opens. If there's any gaps or anything like that, as always, make sure that we have a nice open. But if everything's all fine, then I will see you Monday morning. Thank you.